Ciao Mattia. Hello. Hello everybody. Welcome.
So hello everybody, and thank you for being here. And we can start with the third event in the series of appointment that is called Open Field Lunch, and it is organized by the Habitat Research Center. And the follow one was dedicated to the landscape habitats, and now it will focus on the productive habitats. And this appointment, it will be moderated by me, Matteo Tettoni, Anna Carla Almeida, and Giuseppe Gabbiani. I'm a PhD student from Università Europe di Venezia, and now I'm a guest PhD student at EPFL. And so I very briefly introduce myself, and then Anna Carla and Giuseppe Gabbiati the same. And my research, my PhD thesis focuses on to studies how the developments of the Alps has been defined by external phenomena that have changed physical, social, and economic context. And to do this, I started with an historical overview to the alpine landscape alteration processes in Piemonte, in the north of Italy. And now with the new extraction perspective, like the cobalt case, a raw material that is necessary for the ecological transition, new extractive processes are underway, and this allowed me to study some paradox and contrast in this process. So, Anna Carla, I will leave you the floor.
So, hello everybody. It's a pity not being with you today because actually I'm on my fieldwork leave. I'm in Italy now, studying a company town. What is a company town? It's a city founded and managed by one industry that managed all the living conditions of the city, including housing, hospitals, schools, and everybody. And my research. It's trying to investigate how the industry influences the conditions of habitability in a contemporary company town. And I'm very interested in urban history and industry history and the impact of larger industries in the territory in a long term duration, in a very long duration of period of time from the beginning of the 20th century until nowadays. Welcome everybody again, and happy to see you here.
So hello, everybody. Thanks, first of all, to all LabVIEW members for this invitation. I'm Giuseppe Galbiati. I graduated from the Politecnico of Milan in architectural engineering, and I'm now a PhD researcher here at EPFL at the SAM Lab under the direction of Professor Franz Graf. And my field of research is preservation of modern architecture and energy efficiency of the existing building stock.
So today for this event, we have two guests, Roberto Sega and Marcello Modica. I'm starting to introduce the first speaker, that is Roberto Sega. He's an architect and urban planner, and he's an expert in urban and territorial planning, specializing in alpine and metropolitan context. He graduated from Università Iowa di Venezia in 2010 with Professor Bernardo Secchi, and in 2018 he became a PhD in architecture and urban science, with a research focusing on industrial production roles in the construction of the Alpine city territory. He also created the book Les Alpes Productives with Professor Manfred Perlich, and also participated with the essay Le Alpi una catena produttiva, The Alps a Productive Chain, in the book Territorio e Produzione, created by Professor Cristina Bianchetti. And now he's a project manager for the Federal Office for Spatial Development in Bern. So, Roberto, thank you for being here. I will leave you the floor.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, good morning to everybody. So first of all, thank you to ASRC, Habitat Reserve Center, and especially to Mattia Tettoni for the invitation. So as I have to share the screen, sorry. Partager. Please tell me if you see something. Maybe I'm not allowed, or I
can try to control. I don't know.
Okay, perfect.
It's okay. You can see the screen.
Yes, we can see the screen very well.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as you said, I'm an architect and a urban planner. Today I'm working at the ARE, which is the Federal Office of Spatial Development. But yeah, the topic I'm going to present you today is somehow the result of my PhD research and also my postdoc research that I've carried out there at the EPFL inside the Laboratory of Urbanism, led by Professor Paola Vigano. So basically, the objective of my work was to propose a reflection on Alpine urbanity through the observation of the space of production. In this perspective, the productive space and their infrastructure are used as a lens through which read and conceptualize the issue of territorial development with inside can say a marginal context as perceived today the Alpine region. So the main hypothesis of my work is that a new type of industry could be able to direct with of course, with greater equilibrium and ecological awareness than in the past, the socio-economic demographic development of the Alps. Mattia told me that I have 15-20 minutes, so I decided not to present my PhD research. That will take too long. So I find it more interesting here to discuss directly with you about two key design concepts that somehow came out of my work. So the first one is the productive mesh, and the second concept is the Alpine metropolitan figure. And you will see, I hope at least at the end of the presentation, that these two concepts are, for me, are very linked between them. So first of all, I would like to highlight the fact that industrial production and more broadly economic activities are always been a key element in constructing city and society. Here you can find two quotes. The second one is a quote of Adriano Olivetti that explain that for him the company is not just a place of production, but it's also the main driver of economic and social development. And the important thing is that it has a responsibility towards the community and the territory. So yeah, please keep this point in mind all along my presentation. Over time, the different proto-industrial and industrial phases with their evolution, but also with their crisis and contradiction, have shaped the development of the Alpine region. Over the last few decades, industrial space has been radically transformed. We have faced both technological and economic shifts. For example, we have switched from a logic of offshoring production in other states, and now we are reflecting on reshoring policies. So how to attract back the industry. Moreover, today's industrial system is also facing new challenges related, for example, to the energy and the environmental transition on one hand, and on political and financial crisis on the other hand. And we can also speak about the pandemic and also the war that add the difficulty in getting raw materials for the secondary sector. More than ever, therefore, is it important today to come back, to return to observe the territory by trying to imagine how new logics and form of industry can contribute to the development of urbanization patterns. For this, I've tried, first of all, to represent the different layers of what we have called the Alpine productive machine, in order to reveal first of all the presence of this machine and the logic in this specific Alpine context. Here you can see a section. The reference, of course, is the valley section of Geddes, where I've tried to represent the complexity and also the synergy between the different parts of the territory, but also how people use and exploit the different parts of the territory. This work was for me important because we are used to underestimate the presence of industry in the Alps, while on the contrary, the role of economic activities, energy infrastructure, like in this case, but also transport infrastructure, have played a key role in constructing livable conditions for human habitation. On one hand, we should say that industry has produced over time several dynamics of urban polarization that have accentuated the crisis of mountain agriculture and the population, so the depopulation of marginal area, in particular for the secondary valleys, like in this case, this is Visp. And yeah, but on the other hand, industry brought also progress and prosperity into a region that had been for a long time inaccessible and that was also underdeveloped. In order to understand and describe the relationship between economic activities and the Alpine region, I have carried out several number of fieldwork. We have done it also with the student, by feet, by bike, but also using a small plane. So I like now to take you with me on one of these trips, thanks of a series of maps and photos that I will show you. So, for example, if you travel through the main valley floor of Rhone Valley, it's easy to come across of a series of platforms, sorry, and logistic area, gravel pits, factories, and storage facilities, as if you were crossing a sort of huge productive linear city. In this map, you can see how the valley floor of the Rhone has become a sort of infrastructure at the corridor, And you can also perceive the rhythm and the rhyme of this large iconic productive platform all along the valley floor that are represented here on the maps in black. In the Alps, as in other contexts of diffuse urbanization, industrialization appears as a rural rather than an urban phenomenon. The presence of workforce spread through the whole region, as well as the local presence of many natural resources, have driven the economic and the urban development of this region. So, and it was possible even if we were somehow far away from the big metropolitan areas. This is the case of Syngenta. I present you an example of a small sugar factory that during the last century was used to exploit the sugar beet fields on the Chablais region near the Léman Lake. And that today has become one of the big international chemical industry. If we look at the growth of this industry over time, we can see how it has become bigger as the city center of Montaigne, that is the small city near the industry. And it's also interesting to see how the urban structure has merged with the productive tissue, creating a sort of hybrid productive urban landscape that is that we can also find in other places along the Rhone Valley floor, but also in other Alpine valleys. In order to represent this original interaction and this rhythm between urban and the productive settlements, I have worked on the concept of this productive mesh, productive network, we can call it also. This gives me the opportunity to represent in a diagrammatic way the presence of industry in Alpine valleys, the relation also with the secondary valleys, and all the different elements of the territory. And yeah, especially with this concept, I'm trying to emphasize its structuring role in the construction of the Alpine city territory. Then the second topic I would like briefly to discuss with you is the opposition between lowland metropolitan area and mountain area as an obstacle to a more coherent and horizontal spatial development. In my opinion, we won't be able to think about the economic and urban future of mountain areas if we don't agree to reconsider the marginality of the Alpine region in relation to the hegemony of the major metropolitan center that are, like you see in this map, that are surrounding the Alpine space. So to address this, we need to move beyond the idea that tourism should be the only possible horizon for a mountain area, and we should instead work on a more inclusive figure that keep together city and Alpine space. That's why I propose this second concept of the Alpine metropolitan figure, a concept that let's say calls for a closer economic synergy between metropolitan and Alpine region, and that is based on a logic of territorial federalism and mutual aid between the different parts of the territory. So this unique system is enriched by the complementarity of the two sides, overcoming the logic of exploitation of one territory over the other. It will then be possible to imagine a more attractive territory, a territory that can be also competitive at the European scale, where a person can work and live all year long, and not only, for example, in a high season. An alpine metropolis that, like in this example, can reach almost 1.8 million of inhabitants, and where the services of big metropolitan area like Geneva or Lausanne, with their university, hospital, and public equipments, are combined with the natural resources and energy infrastructure. But also a territory where landscape and ecological structure do not stop at the borders, and where finally, this is the link with the first concept, it could be possible to rethink this original and productive hybrid tissue, that thanks to the fact that the territory has rediscovered new attractivities, we can, let's say, have a new possibility to work on the structure of this valley floor. Yes, so I come back to the two images. The first concept was the productive mesh, and the second one, the alpine metropolitan figure. To conclude, I would like to make a little bit of publicity. So this is the new book that I wrote together with Manfred Berlik, and also in which Marcello wrote an article. So yeah, for the person that are interested, I can share a part of this publication. And of course, I'm here to speak about you, to discuss about you. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, Roberto.
The second guest is Marcello Modica, and Anna Carla, would you like to introduce Marcello?
Yes, very happy to have Marcello today with us. So Marcello Modica studied urban planning and design at the Polytechnic University of Milan, and he holds a PhD from the Technical University of Munich. His research encompasses post-industrial landscapes, transformation and revitalization, territorial and spatial development in fragile and peripheral contexts, as well as interdisciplinary research by design approaches. In these recent years, he focused on the emerging challenge of brownfield redevelopment in European Alps, coordinating a project named the TRALS Alpine Industrial Landscape Transformation, funded by the Interreg Alpine Space Program from 2018 to 2021. He's author of Alpine Industrial Landscapes Towards a New Approach of Brownfield Redevelopment in Mountain Regions, and the co-author of Brownfield Transformation in Fragile Territories. Today, he is currently postdoctoral research at a fellow at the University of Udine and Polytechnic Department of Engineering and Architecture, where he investigates the concept of territorial regeneration through regional funded research project. So Marcello, the floor is yours. We are looking forward to hear you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the introduction. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see it? At full screen, yeah?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, So good morning to everybody also from my side. And today I'm going to present you like this research topic that I'm investigating since a few years on a productive landscape in transition in peripheral regions. And I will combine like a first part describing briefly what was my PhD research on brownfield redevelopment in mountain regions and in the Alps, and then also what I'm working on right now at the University of Udine on productive landscape in non-metropolitan regions. So let's just start saying that peripheral regions are, I mean, should be, let's say, intended as not just for their geographical remoteness, but just let's say because of their settlement system, they of course level of accessibility, but also like the limited economic base and opportunities. There are a lot of research and a lot of definitions of peripheral regions, and I'm focusing on those in the European context. So this is like the territorial framework, and these peripheral regions were affected also by an industrial development throughout the 20th century, a very different industrial development compared to large cities and metropolitan areas, because we can see that they experienced like for the first roughly 50-60 years of the 20th century a resource-based industrialization. So really let's say focusing on natural resources and bringing on having polluting large-scale productive landscapes, usually linked to the railway network, and usually very monosectoral, so focusing on one specific sector. Then the second type, let's say, of development model that peripheral region was and is that of the flexible specialization, and this brought a very different type of productive landscape with low added value light industries, a small scale, multi-sectoral, also in forms of cluster or industrial districts, and usually linked to the road network. So these are two very different landscapes, two very different models, and my two research projects, the one on the Alps and the other one in the Friuli Venezia Giulia territory, are let's say dealing with these two types of peripheral productive landscapes. So let's start with like the first one, following also the presentation by Roberto that were done just before me. Also, I was focusing on the Alpine region, which can be considered somehow a peripheral region within Europe. So it's not. It's really in the core of Europe, but it is surrounded by very well developed metropolitan areas. And throughout the 20th century, the Alps were subject to this kind of increasing peripheralization that involved a special industrial development model. And I was focusing on like those Alpine brownfields, so industrial sites of surface over 5 hectares, so large industrial sites belonging to the first model of industrialization, so to the first phase, dealing with resource-intensive processes, and in traditional industrial sectors in mountain areas, so ferrous and non-ferrous metallurgy, chemical industry, building material industry, textile and paper industry. And I mapped across the entire Alpine region almost 160 brownfield sites, so huge industrial sites that are no more in use and are, let's say, waiting for transformation that is really difficult, let's say, to take place. No, and I was. Let's say I wanted to investigate how these alpine brownfields are made of, let's say, how they look, but also proposing, let's say, a different reading for this brownfield, because we are normally we see brownfields in the mainstream urban setting as a kind of void within the city, but here we don't have the city as we are used to. So we have these large industrial sites that let's say they were placed or like developed in a kind of rural, we can say, a landscape that then were, of course, urbanized through the time. But I wanted to, let's say, propose an alternative reading, as I mean, from sites, so from former industrial sites to industrial landscapes, because the interaction between a certain type of industry, so an industrial process, and the mountain environment, so the surroundings that hosted, let's say, these sites generate, from my point of view, a very specific and recurring landscape structure. And this was like the guiding principle, let's say, of my research. So I compared different brownfields across the Alps, across very different alpine regions and countries, and also types of let's say, industrial facilities themselves. And I was able, let's say, to really understand, or like to, let's say, draw a recurring, let's say, spatial model related to a specific industrial production, and so a brownfield that is it is generated from the disappearance, from like the shrinking of the activity itself. And I was working with four main typologies that are the most representative ones across the entire alpine space. So cement industry, aluminium industry, steel making, and textile industries. And I was then working with four real sites, for like a case study sites, also doing field work and exploring the site itself, and also like talking with like the people that were responsible for the site and for the community. So to really understand what are like the let's say the perspective and the intention over the transformation. So to really grab these details and these informations, and based on this from site to landscape a model that I tried to develop, I analyzed for each of the first sites like the landscape structure. So to really understand the site itself, how it is placed in the wider landscape context, and including in this reading a lot of spaces and in let's say built and open spaces and infrastructure related spaces that usually are not included in the let's say in the planning and the planning based understanding of these sites in the mountain context, no? And then from this level, then I was able to draw, or to, let's say, try to draw how the transformation of these site landscapes can take place according, of course, to the intentions by the local development plans, but also trying to put something new from my side, of course. And I developed these three landscape transformation systems: the backbone, borders, and core. And I use them as a kind of framework for each of the first sites, trying to identify how the various components of the site and its related landscape can change over time, which kind of action, which kind of interventions can take place. And I applied this model to all the 4 sites. So here you can see the Italian one, this, and these are like the other 3 sites in Switzerland, Austria, and France. So as a cement plant and an aluminum industry, a steel works, and a textile mill. And one of the most interesting conclusion that I came to was that despite, let's say, the very different spatial and landscape footprint of these sites, that is, of course, strongly related to the previous industrial process and the activity that was done there. This, let's say, structural systemic model to read, interpret, and also transform the site, let's say, leads to the same results for all these different landscape, productive landscape typologies, no? And that was really interesting, because in on a theoretical basis, of course, this can be like a model that can be really applied to the entire, let's say, system of alpine brownfields. So this 160 brownfields that I have mapped, and also it led me to let's say, to think about a landscape approach that can be applied to these productive landscapes in, productive sites and active and not active, let's say, in this mountain and peripheral context in general. And this leads to my second research project, which is like the current one at the University of Udine, that deals more in general with productive landscapes in a peripheral region. For those of you who don't know, the Friuli Venezia Giulia region is a peripheral, let's say, non-metropolitan urbanized region in the extreme northeast of Italy, counting roughly 1 million inhabitants, and going from the inner Alpine Valley in the north to the Adriatic Sea to the south. So it is a very complex region, a very tiny but very complex, and especially it encloses many typical features of peripheral regions in Italy. It has a slight demographic decline in the last decades, but also it shows a very high land take that is mainly, let's say, related not to the increase of in inhabitants, of course, but to a bad, let's say, planning model that let's say push like forward land take for commercial and infrastructural and industrial activities, and this is a point of interest. It has also a very obsolete settlement system, like everywhere in Italy. So let's say 50% of the built built space was let's say built between the 1950 and the 2000. So it is not historical in the narrow sense, but it also not incorporates like the most recent criteria for example, for energy and environmental for energy efficiency and environmental sustainability. So this region really is an example of peripheral region within Italy, not in terms of accessibility, but in terms of development model, development background, and also like the state of the art today. Also, it is a region that it has a very rich environmental quality. Almost 40% of the region is covered by forest, and it is the 4th richest region in Italy for biodiversity in terms of flora. No? So you see, there are a lot of let's say contrast. No, I will skip this slide. Maybe we can go back later, because this is like the framework of the research that I'm carrying on, which is related. It is, let's say, funded by the regional authority, and it is related to the new the new regional plan, the Piano di Governo del Territorio, that is currently in the making. And within this project, I'm focusing again on productive landscapes, so trying to understand what is the geography of productive spaces in a non-metropolitan and peripheral region in the Italian context, but also in the European context, I would say. And here we can see a first map that shows the different territorial clusters within the region. So you can see this black grain in the background are all the productive buildings, so the industrial buildings and the industrial zones within the region. And we can see that there are only two urban, almost, let's say, urban cluster of productive landscape around the cities of Udine and Pordenone, which are the main inland cities of the region, and they are also at the center of industrial districts, so a kind of concentration of production activities that developed from the 1960s, 70s onwards. Then we have most of the plain. The agricultural plain is shows a peri-urban, let's say, cluster of productive landscape that are, let's say, mixed with very small municipalities and an extensive agricultural landscape, intensive agricultural landscape. And then we have the alpine and coastal territorial clusters that are related, of course, to the Alps, to the mountain areas, so the productive valley floors, and also the coast with the industrial agglomeration. Sorry, around the seaports of Trieste, Monfalcone, and Sacorno, which is in the lagoon landscape, let's say. And this is another map that I developed in the past few months based on some databases, but also adding a lot myself, because these databases were not updated at all. And this is like the geography of waste, which is very interesting, because in this kind of peripheral regions, we really have this, let's say, this wastescape that is widespread all over the urbanized territory. It is a common, let's say, feature of this, let's say, Italian middle, let's say, landscape. So not like the metropolitan cores, nor the almost empty, let's say, inner areas. So in this kind of context, we can see that there is a very widespread geography of waste, as I say, and in this geography I included industrial brownfields, military brownfields. So we are talking about 15 million of square meters of brownfields, but also general brownfields without any specific functional background, landfills, abandoned quarries, and contaminated sites. So this is a very complex geography that is, I mean, the point of interest is that this map overlaps almost entirely with this one. So the productive landscapes are also incorporating somehow most of this geography of waste. And this is a point of interest because it's a point of a possible point, let's say, of action. Then I have identified 5 territorial transects as a kind of a zoom in, let's say, as a kind of space for in-depth analysis of the regional territory itself, and also the productive landscape and the geography of waste too. And this territorial transect involves different parts, different environments within the regions, on the mountain, the pre-alpine areas, the plains, and the coast, and the lower plain. No? And in each of these transects, there are different territorial dynamics, different settlement systems, and different also productive landscapes. Another step that is really in the making, I want to underline, is to identify the main typologies, let's say, of productive landscape that we can find in this specific region. And we have the platform, so large-scale productive facilities connected to the regional railway network. These are we just have a few relevant cases dating back to the 1930s, 1970. So large-scale industrial areas. Then we have the parks that are, let's say, planned industrial zones set up by local development plans, and mainly filled up with small, medium-sized productive facilities, and connected to the regional road networks. Then we have the agglomerations that are similar to the parks, but as a difference, they are largely unplanned. So it is a spontaneous, let's say, growth of small-scale industrial and craftsman activities that is typical of Italian industrial districts. And here in the region, we have a few, and then the islands. So isolated productive sites surrounded by, let's say, rural, forested, or unbuilt, let's say, spaces. And this last is very similar to those alpine brownfields that I presented in the first part. But here in this region, we can find these islands, let's say, also out of the mountain context. And then I wanted to show, going towards the end, some critical situations that I have identified and that I'm planning, let's say, to work with. And the first one is those industrial platforms. So like the first type that I just showed, that are shrinking. And many of these platforms were developed in a time of, let's say, planned in industrialization, which is also very typical of peripheral context. In this case, we have the industrial settlements of Tor Viscosa, which is a very famous new town that was built in the 1930s by at the time one of the most important chemical companies. It was called SNIA, and this at the time and until the 1960s was really a powerful industrial platform for the production of cellulose that was used then in the chemical industry for viscose and synthetic fibers making. But since a few decades, the activity here is shrinking very fast, and now less than 10% of the whole platform is used for production by another company that is doing also chemical production. And the question is really how to deal with these shrinking industrial platforms that usually are involving problems of contamination, because they were related to these traditional heavy and polluting industries, and also how to, let's say, reuse possibly this platform, because they have a very powerful infrastructures in terms of like energy connection to the railway system, water connection. In this case, we see that there is a kind of inner dock, let's say, that was used in the past to link this industrial platform to the sea. But you see, like, the actual state of this site is very bad. So what can we do, let's say, with this platform? Can we, let's say, reuse them? This is an open question, let's say, and one of the most interesting critical situations. Then a second one is that of industrial parks. So planned industrial zones from the 70s onwards, let's say, that are actually underdeveloped. So we have these industrial parks that were planned for a certain number, let's say, of industries, of activities, and this number was never reached. So this industrial parks, they never developed as expected. So at the moment they are strongly underused. We see a lot of empty spaces that were somehow infrastructured, but they are not hosting, let's say, anything. No, let's say, productive activities. Those activities that are located there are, let's say, suffering of this kind of under development, because they don't have any kind of relational proximity. They don't have services there that can be let's say, useful. And in many cases, these industrial parks, they were planned, as we can see here, in very environmentally and ecologically sensible areas. Here we are just next, let's say, to the Tagliamento River, which is like the main river of the region and one of the most beautiful natural rivers in Europe, so flowing really in a natural state. And this is also a topic of interest. And last but not least, this industrial agglomeration that are entrenched with the waste landscapes that I was showing in the previous map. No, and this is a very common situation across this region, but also across Italy. So to have this spontaneous, let's say, unplanned agglomeration of productive activities, very small scale. You can see very small scale industry that developed, let's say, in the open countryside, but next to it, through let's say, through the time, or connected to also this industrial development, we can find today a lot of wastescapes. So here we have, for example, brownfields, military brownfields that are very common in this region, because this was the let's say, the military, like the military barrack, let's say, of Italy during like the Cold War, and most of these military brownfields are now not in use. We have landfills that also were opened in the countryside out of the residential areas, and now some of them are, let's say, closing down. We have former quarries. We have also like solar parks that are like developing in recent years on previous green fields. So there is also an issue why we should develop this like solar park on agricultural ground without, for example, incorporating them in this industrial agglomeration and or these industrial platforms. So these are, let's say, some of the most common, let's say, critical situation concerning productive landscape in the region. And
sorry, Marcello, I just ask you to conclude.
Yeah. This is the very last slide. There is, of course, a continuity between like these two research projects, and what is more interesting that I tried in the first project, and I'm trying to carry on also in this one, is to really go on with this landscape-based approach to support a special ecological and socio-economic transition of productive habitats in a peripheral context, considering a few open research and design questions that are still open. How to face the void, so low development pressure in this context for productive development, let's say, how to mitigate the impact on different levels and on different scales, and how to plan productive landscape, let's say, at the regional scale, so towards the concentration on the one hand, or to keep this kind of polycentrism on the other hand. And that's all, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcello. So I pass the words to Mattia and to colleagues that are in presence in EPFL.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Marcello, for your presentation. Now I start with a very, I would say, maybe generic and open question, but in order maybe to start a small debate around us and the audience, both online and here at the EPFL. And the question that maybe could deal with the first part of both presentation, it could be what is the active roles of the history in your research process? I would say, does this study allow you to build a sort of backcasting scenario for the future? Because all of the true research trying to think about the future in different ways, in sort of reactivation of or reinterpretation of some processes. And so maybe this, I am conscious that it's a very large and open question, but maybe allow us to start a small debate around this topic.
Roberto, you want to start?
I can start. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, for me, it was very, very important to pay attention to the way in which during time we have constructed the territory. So we are adding more and more materials, more and more infrastructure to this territory, and especially for the Alpine region, it means that during time we allowed this region to become less marginal. The infrastructure that was built for the industry allowed them to bring public transport, for example. The exploitation of natural resources allowed the localization of big industrial platforms, and in the future it will allow to rethink the relationship between Alps and big metropolitan area, because we will see how is central this topic of production of energy. And I mean, in the past we have done it for other reasons, and in the future we will say will take advantage from this let's say stratification of the territory. So for me, the point is pay attention to the stratification of the territory, and how all this material can also become something else in the future. So it depends from us how we are able to rethink all these spatial capital that are there, and yeah. So for me, I mean, it's a little bit this the point. Look back and then forecast for the future. I don't know, Marcello, if you.
Yeah, I think the issue of stratification is also something that I encounter, let's say, in reading this alpine brownfields as landscapes, let's say, themselves. So in terms of how they were formed, which kind of also development model, let's say, led to them. But what was really surprising I mean, for me in dealing with this alpine brownfields in relation to history, and I mean to the past, the present, and the future too, was not just like how these sites were formed, so like the form itself, because it's something that it's quite common for all the settlements everywhere, but how, like, the people there, so the people, let's say, dealing with this site and having this problem of how to reuse and manage, let's say, this huge brownfield site, how they perceive this site, and how they wanted, let's say, to, I mean, how they expected from the transformation of these sites to happen. And it was completely different from what we usually what we usually know and experience with urban brownfields. So brownfields in core cities, in dense urban fabric, in metropolitan cores, and so on. that usually we tend to exclude like industry, because industry was something that it is from the past, more or less. Now, in the last few years, we are thinking like back that probably we need industry, we need more industry back in Europe. But so we usually tend to exclude, let's say, industry, and we focus on, for example, cultural services, residential function, offices. So kind of mixes, or I mean, like the so-called of service, the service sector that in cities it's something that is expanding since like a few decades now. In these mountain regions and in peripheral regions too, where the service sector is existing but not so advanced yet, because these are kind of lagging like behind regions, the communities see these sites as a potential site for industry, you know, so for a kind of new type of industry, let it be green industry related to, I mean, to natural resources, but in a sustainable way, or like spaces for young people to develop their own ideas, preventing them to leave these valleys and this region. So everybody was really interested into trying to keep like the industrial function in a different way, in a sustainable way, and they were not really interested in any other kind of function. So this also, it's a very tricky issue that really connects the past of these regions with the future that might be. And these sites, I mean, brownfield sites and productive landscapes are always at the center, you know, of this process. And probably it's up to us to try to, let's say, to transform them in a way that they can, they can, let's say, incorporate this economic relevance. I mean, the one that they had, also to keep like to have in the future. So this is a reflection that I can say, asking to your question.
Okay. Then a specific question for Marcello, because he's focusing on the Friuli Venezia Giulia region. Because one of the topics of the productive habitats that are investigated by the Habitat Research Center is the Industry 4.0. And I know quite well that there is a sort of district in Friuli, close to the Tavagnacco, the comune of Tavagnacco and so on. Are you considering it in your research or not? It's something that you are investigating?
Yeah, this one, and there is also another one that is in the Tagliamento Valley in the Alps near Tolmezzo. It's called Carnia Industrial Park, which is an initiative of developing high-tech, we will say, industry in the Alpine setting. So it's a very interesting model. It is still like developing. I would, let's say, I mean, I'm planning to incorporate them in my research. The fact is that it's really, I mean, the problem that they have here is not probably like maybe the possibility to develop also industry 4.0. Also there are some clusters of advanced industry itself, but how to plan physically these sites, no? Because there was a kind of over planning, over development of industrial areas that are that were, let's say, planned without thinking, for example, at the territory itself. So with a very close-minded logic that was also common in those years, and most of these sites are no longer used or no used in the way that they were planned for. And then we have also this impulse also related to the university and, for example, the science cluster in Trieste that are, let's say, that they might push, let's say, for develop a different type of industry that can take place. How? This is a very open question. It maybe, I mean, it can be interesting also to reflect on how this Industry 4.0 that attracts some kind of workers that are not the typical workers of the small, medium, let's say, traditional firm in Italy, how they can perceive, for example, living in a region like this, where the quality of life generally is higher than in metropolitan regions. I am experiencing that by myself. I come from Milan, so the largest metropolitan region in Italy. Then I lived in Munich, and now I am living here, and I see that the quality of life is very high. Of course, you have maybe you don't have all the opportunities that you can have in terms of job market, but also like a culture and so on that you can have in a global city, in a global metropolis. But the quality of life in terms of environment, in terms of free time, leisure time, in terms of landscapes that you can explore just out of your door, let's say, is extremely high. And this is something that, let's say, these social no, I mean, this like people that relate to Industry 4.0 and to high tech and to this advanced industry consider. And this is something. It's like a point that I came across reading also in let's say across the European scale. I'm not sure if it is already in the plan of the regional authorities, if they know that. But that's a point. So this kind of peripheral region can be attractive in terms of environment and landscape in like the broad sense. So, and this can really be let's say a pro, let's say, for these kind of industries from my point of view, just very roughly. So thinking very roughly.
There is some question.
There is this effectively this new figure, the alpine engineering, no? That exactly want to go there because there is the possibility to go to ski, to live in a beautiful environment, and this is, I mean, a very interesting point for the activity of the territory that we should consider.
Yeah, exactly.
So for the last ones that remain in the room, you have some questions?
Maybe I have one question for Roberto. You opened your presentation quoting Adriano Olivetti, who was surely one of the most important Italian leader of a brilliant society, but at the same time, he was also a brilliant urbanist, in the sense that in the 50s, he was the president of the...
He was used to work with urbanists.
Yeah, and but I mean, your concept of Alpine metropolitan region, in a certain sense, recalled me the concept of comunità that was developed by Adriano Olivetti, in the sense that even in his comunità, he tried to develop this sort of hybrid condition, mixing services like hospitals. We know that in Ivrea, the hospital was, for example, built by Gardella and even a lot of other important buildings. So even the quality of the architecture with the natural landscape that was there in that Canavese region. So, but at the end, what happened is that this community didn't work, was not accepted by at a national level. So, have you tried to do a parallel between your concept and the concept of the community, or how are also the future development of your Alpine metropolitan concept?
I mean, if you speak about the value that are inside this project of Comunità, I mean, yes, they are, I think, they speak about the quality of life. They are speaking about the necessity to put at the center the people, and I mean, not only the work. And I think this is something that we should take in mind when we think about a new type of industry. Then it's true, it's a model that, it had a big success, but then with several crises, I mean, we know that the history of Olivetti, I mean, it was, I think also the dynamic, the global dynamic that arrived after play a role in order to, let's say, destroy this utopia finally. So what I'm proposing, I mean, is based somehow, in a certain way on the main value, but because I'm speaking about federalism, I'm speaking about mutual aid, and we can think that we need, I don't know, people like Olivetti to have a sort of paternalistic role inside the urbanization, but I'm not sure that this is possible. I mean, so for me, is the role of public that should play a central role. And I mean, if you want to defend the federalism, if you want to speak about mutual aid in a marginal territory, you have to invest in infrastructure, in equipment. You have to connect more the different places in order to allow the people to stay there, and also to go there because they are interested to find how Marcello said. I mean, the potential are there. The landscape is beautiful. Everything is there, but we need a more connection. We have to go out from this condition of marginality, and at the same time keep the quality of the space. I mean, we don't have to copy the model of metropolitan area, but we have to find something else. And this is why I'm proposing this new figure in between mountain area and big metropolis.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I have a last question, we can say like this before closing.
Siamo rimasti solo italiani?
Yes, I think so, but still we
Now
speak
keep in English. Yeah.
we speak in English. About the landscape transformation systems that you presented, and the figure of the territorial regeneration. How to think about these highly infrastructured spaces for a just transition, thinking about the climate change and the problems that the alpine landscapes are going through with the climate for the next years, the provisions for the next decades, how to combine this kind of production or the rebirth of the regeneration of this kind of production with these issues and these challenges regarding the climate change? I know it's very tricky, it's very general, but still I think it's important to ask.
It's a very huge question for as a last one, so I will try to be very, very quick. I mean, the topic of climate change, of course, is always there. I mean, in my previous research on alpine brownfields, I was not dealing with that in detail. I was more focusing on really on the shape of these brownfields, how they can be read and they can be transformed accordingly. Of course, in this landscape transformation system, I mean, this approach that expands the scale from the site, the built-up site, to the landscape that, let's say, relate to it. allows to incorporate a lot of spaces that are usually unplanned, so that they're not really object of any kind of action, and they can serve for, I mean, in the Italian case, which is like the textile industry, or like the landscape of a textile industry that are shaping some of the alpine valleys. They created some canals or some kind of waterways that design a very complex, let's say, a water system. And the spaces, for example, just to be very detailed, like the spaces that have been generated, I mean, between like the river courses and these waterways that were built by, I mean, thanks to textile industries, can be, for example, used as a kind of flooding zones, or like spaces that, I mean, green spaces that, I mean, now they don't have any kind of function, and they nor are, let's say, involved in any kind of plan like this. So that's why, I mean, enlarging like the view from the site to the landscape itself allows to really include several spaces, open spaces that can serve, let's say, at least to mitigate the impact of climate change. Concerning like the current research, we are involving climate change in a more powerful way. So there are a lot of scenarios for the region up to 2050 and 2100 that of course talks about extreme floodings, the rise of the sea level, so that is the disappearance of the lower plains. For example, the Tor Viscosa site is in a part of the region that, according to a study that was done by Climate Central in Princeton, will disappear, will be, let's say, completely flooded at the end of this century. You know, so this is something that we are trying, and I'm trying to.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's really heavy. I'm not sure if it will happen this way, but still, this is like the scenario that we have.
It's a scenario, yeah.
Yeah, and we should really confront. So it's not just what this practical landscape, I mean, what they will be, but how they will deal with the environment and the landscape that is like around us. And this is what I was saying, that it's very important, the shape and the location of these sites across the region, that should be completely redefined from my point of view.
Thank you, Marcello. Roberto, do you want to add something, 2 minutes, or otherwise we can conclude it?
But just maybe to put the accent on the scale of the industry, no? Because I mean, you are dealing, Marcello, with landscape, and this is possible because the size of industrial platform are very, very large, no? So, and this is the fact why industry is a very, very interesting actor in spatial planning. And if you can act with this actor, you will be able to deal with landscape issue, with climate change issue, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, so thank you, Roberto, and thank you, Marcello, and thank you also Anna Carla and Giuseppe, and the audience, both in presence and online. And we can conclude.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. It was a very interesting
Ciao.
conversation. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Cagliari, Marcello.
Yeah.